The battlefield was covered in smoke and fire. Alien war machines crawled across the ruined ground while the air trembled with the roar of engines. Mercenary legions stood ready-hired killers from every corner of the galaxy. Tall-scaled giants with blades burning in their hands, insect-like soldiers with armor, harder than steel, massive brutes carrying cannons on their shoulders. They had fought countless wars for countless masters, and they had never known fear yet. Today, something strange. Spread through their ranks, it was not the enemy's fire. It was not the thunder of explosions. It was a name whispered in low voices, humans. The word itself shook them in ways they did not understand. They had been told the humans were weak, fragile, creatures of flesh and bone too soft to stand in war. The empire that hired them laughed when paying gold for this mission. Crush the colony, they had said, make the humans kneel. The mercenaries expected an easy hunt. They marched forward, roaring. Across the wasteland, their armor shining and their weapons hungry for blood. But then the first human squad appeared, walking slowly out of the smoke. Their figures small, their armor dark, their faces hidden behind cold, glowing visors. They did not roar, they did not shout. They came in silence, and the silence was worse than any war cry. One mercenary captain with scars across his jaw barked orders at his troops, yet his voice cracked as he stared at the humans. He had faced monsters that breathed, fire machines that tore mountains apart, and he had never once felt the shake in his chest that he felt now. The humans moved like shadows, every step measured, every weapon steady. They did not rush, they did not flinch, they simply advanced as if death itself walked beside them. The mercenaries raised their cannons. Beams of fire cut the sky, but the humans broke formation, sliding apart with perfect precision, returning fire with brutal accuracy. One shot, one kill, bodies of mercenaries fell. Before they even understood how panic spread through the ranks, alien warriors who once feared nothing now stumbled back, muttering tales they had heard in taverns across the stars. Whispers of battles where humans never surrendered, where even when, burned and broken, they fought with bare hands until the last breath. Some said humans had no fear of death, others said they welcomed it. Mercenaries who had once laughed at such stories now watched them unfold before their own eyes. Every rumor was true. The Empire commanders watching from distant ships shouted across comms demanding the mercenaries push forward. They called them cowards, threatened to cut their pay. But no threat could break the terror that spread. Humans were not fast, not large, not armored like tanks. Yet they moved with a calm that felt unnatural. Their eyes behind glowing visors showed no mercy, no hesitation. They looked like predators. And in that silence, the mercenaries felt like prey. Then it happened. One mercenary giant, larger than any human, rushed forward with a roar, swinging a blade of molten fire. The humans did not move until the last moment. Three of them turned at once, firing in unison. The giant fell in seconds, his weapon crashing into the dirt. The mercenaries gasped, their courage snapping like glass. Whole squads began to retreat, weapons dropped into the dust, orders forgotten. The alien commanders screamed across the channels demanding discipline, but none listened. The fear was too deep as the battle broke apart. The human squad stopped. They did not chase the fleeing soldiers. They did not cheer victory. They simply stood silent, their weapons lowering slowly, their visors glowing cold in the smoke. And for the mercenaries watching, from the shadows, that silence was worse than slaughter. They had seen many enemies, but none like this. None who fought with such calm and such ruthless precision. The battlefield that should have been theirs now belonged to the humans when the alien. Commanders realized their mercenaries would no longer fight. They withdrew their fleets in anger, cursing the name of the killers they had hired, but their rage could not erase the truth. Mercenaries across the galaxy would hear what happened today. They would hear how proud warriors had turned to cowards at the sight of humans, how one squad had broken an army without shouting a word, and from this day the name human would no longer sound weak. It would carry fear across every corner of the stars. The battlefield that once echoed with the roars of alien mercenaries was silent. Now only the smoke of burning wrecks and the heavy footsteps of humans remained. The mercenary legions that had sworn to fight for gold had abandoned the ground. They once claimed unstoppable, their captains hid in shadows whispering their shame, while the human squad that had broken them stood calm among the ruins, their visors glowing coldly in the dark. They did not celebrate. They did not taunt. Their silence was more terrifying than any roar. News of the defeat spread quickly through the empire that had hired the mercenaries. Commanders argued in their high halls, furious that a small group of fragile creatures had made their soldiers flee. They called it an accident. They said the mercenaries had lost discipline. They promised the galaxy that humans were nothing special but whispers, carried faster than their lies in taverns across distant stations. Mercenaries told stories with trembling voices. Of the day they faced humans, they said the humans never shouted, never hesitated, they fought like shadows, and they made even the strongest warrior feel like prey. The truth of those whispers grew when more battles followed. Mercenaries hired again, and again to test the humans found themselves refusing contracts. Some took the gold but vanished before reaching human space. Others simply said, no, treasure is worth fighting them. One captain, scarred from a dozen wars, told his crew I would rather starve than face those silent killers, and his men agreed, their loyalty shattered not by hunger or greed, but by fear. On the front lines, the humans advanced slowly, never rushing, never revealing more than necessary. Their armies were not countless, their fleets not as large as the ancient empires, but what they used with ruthless precision. Alien scouts who tracked them, reported strange tactics. No other species used. Humans fought, as if they could read the minds of their enemies, setting traps that led whole squadrons into slaughter. They never wasted fire, never wasted movement. Their silence spread like poison through enemy lines. On one distant moon, an alien officer ordered a full strike against a human outpost, believing numbers alone would crush them. Hundreds of mercenaries stormed the base, but when the smoke cleared, only human banners remained. The mercenaries had been broken by tricks, by traps, by the relentless calm of defenders who never lost control. Survivors stumbled. Back with eyes wide, they spoke of narrow tunnels filled with shadows of humans who appeared behind them without sound, of men and women who fought on even after their armor was torn, their faces covered in blood, but their weapons still firing until the last breath. The alien empires began to notice something far more dangerous than human weapons. It was human will. No matter how strong their enemies, no matter how hopeless the odds, they did not stop. They did not surrender. This made them horrifying, in ways machines and monsters could never match. A machine can be broken, a beast can be slain. But how do you break a soldier who fights until his last breath? Even mercenaries who sold their lives for profit could not match that kind of resolve soon. Mercenary guilds collapsed entire groups, refusing to answer contracts against humans. Some leaders called them cowards. But the truth was deeper. Mercenaries who had seen humans once never wanted to see them again. Stories grew larger with every telling tales of humans who walked through fire without flinching, of soldiers who died smiling as they dragged enemies down with them, of squads who moved like a single creature. Many believed the stories were exaggerated, but still no one dared test them, and yet the galaxy did not remain silent. Powerful empires watched with narrowed eyes for them. Fear was not enough. They wanted control. They needed to prove to their people that humans were not so different, that the whispers of terror were only shadows. And so they began to plan greater tests, larger armies to send against the fragile race, to prove once and for all that mercenaries were simply weak, and that humans were not horrifying, only lucky, but in their hearts. Even they wondered if the whispers were true, and while they planned, the humans continued their silent advance, their banners spreading across more worlds, their soldiers calm and steady, never boasting, never breaking, every step forward, a reminder to the galaxy that what was once mocked as harmless had become something far more dangerous and far more terrifying. The galaxy was restless empires that once laughed at the mention of humans now spoke their name with unease. Their leaders sat in tall councils, whispering behind closed doors. They sent spies across the stars to learn the truth, but the reports that returned were more disturbing than they expected. Each file, each image, each intercepted message carried the same story. Humans were not only fighters, they were survivors. Even when cornered, even when outnumbered, they endured and they endured. With a silence that unsettled even the strongest of minds, mercenary guilds that had once grown fat with wealth now suffered collapse. Their contracts canceled, their fleets, scattered fear had carved into their ranks. No payment, no promise could push them to fight humans again. Those who had once called themselves the strongest warriors of the galaxy now lowered their voices when the name human was spoken. In dark bars of spaceports, rumors spread like fire. Some claimed humans had hearts that pumped not blood, but fire. Others swore that they were born from the void itself. Whatever the stories were, they all ended. The same mercenaries would not face them. Not again. In the shadows of these whispers, humans continued to move forward, quietly, without grand speeches, without threats. They built fleets. They raised defenses, they secured worlds. Every step they took seemed calculated, each victory precise. Some alien observers noticed something even more chilling. The humans did not just fight to win. They fought to learn. Each battle sharpened them. Each loss turned into knowledge. Every scar became a lesson where other species saw war as a tool. Humans seemed to see it as a teacher, and the galaxy began to wonder what kind of fighters would they become after enough battle. On one frontier world, a test was set. The Empire of Korath, known for its cruelty and endless armies, decided to send a full assault to crush a human colony. The mercenaries they hired hesitated, but gold and chains bound them, so they obeyed. Tens of thousands of alien soldiers stormed across the sands of the colony, armed with heavy tanks, and ships darkened the skies. Human settlers should have run. They should have begged for mercy, but instead, the defenders stood their ground, only a few hundred soldiers with old armor and rifles. They dug trenches, they set traps, they prepared to bleed, and when the storm came, they fought with a ferocity that the invaders did not expect. Day after day, the mercenaries charged. Yet the humans did not yield. They fired from shadows, vanished into tunnels, struck at night with precision. Every loss seemed to fuel their fire. The mercenaries began to see them differently at first, as prey, then as predators, and finally, as nightmares. Commanders barked orders, but soldiers muttered in fear. The name human felt heavier with each sunrise. Soon deserters fled in the night, abandoning weapons behind whispers spread through the ranks. They do not fear death. They will never stop. The Korath Empire, furious at the failure, sent more ships orbiting the world, preparing to burn it to ash. But by then, the damage was done. Every mercenary who survived carried the story outward. They had not been defeated by numbers or strength, they had been defeated by resolve. The humans had something no other species carried: an unshakable will, a refusal to surrender. A terrifying truth echoed across the stars. Humans might lose battles, but they would never truly lose a war. And while the empires debated, while mercenaries refused, and while whispers spread, the humans themselves remained silent. Their soldiers never told their stories. Their leaders never announced victories. They simply prepared for the next fight. They did not ask to be feared. They did not demand respect, but their actions, their silence, their unyielding resolve spoke louder than any speech in the quiet halls of space stations. Mercenaries asked one another, "Would you fight them again?" And almost always, the answer came as a whisper, No. Never again, yet the galaxy is not merciful. The empires saw fear not as a warning but as an opportunity. If mercenaries refused to fight, then they would send their own armies, vast fleets prepared to crush the silent. Threat once and for all, but deep inside their leaders' hearts a question remained, one that none dared to ask aloud. What if the mercenaries were right? What if the humans were not harmless at all? What if they were the horror that no empire could contain? The great halls of the Galactic Council were filled with tension. Rulers of empires sat in silence, their jeweled crowns and golden robes hiding the fear that lingered in their eyes. They had seen the reports of mercenaries fleeing from battle. They had heard the whispers of soldiers who swore never to fight humans again, and yet they tried to convince themselves that these were only stories, only exaggerations of frightened warriors desperate to protect their pride. But in their hearts, they knew the truth. Humans were different, and different was dangerous. The council voted to launch a united strike against the humans, not with mercenaries this time, but with their own armies. Legions of soldiers bred for war, fleets of ships forged. In ancient shipyards, generals who had led 100 campaigns, they believed sheer power would crush the myth of humanity once and for all if the mercenaries feared them. Then the empires would show that they did not, and so the fleets gathered. Black clouds of warships blotting out stars as they moved toward the fragile colonies of Earth's children. In the silence of deep space, the human fleets waited. They were smaller, far smaller in number than the combined might of the Galactic Council. Their ships were less polished, their weapons less grand, but their crews stood ready, their faces calm, no cries of glory, no speeches of vengeance. Only the steady quiet of soldiers who had accepted the weight of war. When the enemy arrived, they did not waste time with threats, they simply fought. The first clashes stunned the galaxy. The council fleets expected panic, but they found none. Instead, they were met with traps, ambushes, precision strikes. Humans struck from hidden positions, tearing apart larger ships with smaller ones, moving with a unity the aliens could not understand. It was not technology that broke the fleets. It was coordination. It was will. While other soldiers fought for empires or for honor, humans fought for survival, for one another, for something deeper than orders. Stories from the front grew worse. For the council soldiers, entire squadrons vanished into the darkness, never returning. Commanders reported human soldiers appearing where they should not be, cutting supply lines, striking command posts, and vanishing again. Prisoners who were captured whispered of the human gaze, eyes that never looked away, eyes that seemed to see through every lie they told. Many claimed that the silence of humans on the battlefield was worse than the weapons they carried. No roars, no cheers, just the cold certainty of warriors who would not stop on the colony of Vera. The council armies landed in full force. They outnumbered the human defenders 10-1. They expected an easy victory. But the battle turned into a nightmare. Every street, every building became a trap. Humans fought not as individuals, but as a single living weapon, striking with timing so perfect it felt impossible. Soldiers who thought they had cornered. Humans found themselves surrounded instead. Those who tried to run found no escape. The battle raged for days until the council finally realized what the mercenaries had learned long before humans could not be broken. The galaxy watched in disbelief. As reports poured in, mighty fleets humiliated ancient armies forced to retreat, entire campaigns lost, not because the humans were stronger, but because they refused to yield their silence. Their calm, their unshakable will spread terror deeper than any weapon. The mercenaries had been right all along. The harmless creatures the galaxy once mocked were anything but harmless. They were the storm no one had expected. And yet in the halls of power, denial still lingered. Rulers refused to admit defeat. They told their people the war was not lost. They told themselves humans could still be contained. But their soldiers knew the truth. Their generals knew the truth. Every warrior who had faced humans knew the truth. The galaxy had awakened something. It did not understand something it could not control in the quiet aftermath of each battle as smoke rose into the black sky. The humans did not celebrate. They simply prepared for the next wave. They did not speak of victory. They did not shout of vengeance. They remained what they had always been: silent, calm, relentless. And the silence was louder than any weapon to those who feared them. It was the silence of death to those who followed them. It was the silence of resolve. And to the galaxy, it was the silence that would not end. The war spread like fire across the stars. Fleets clashed on the edges of forgotten systems. Worlds that had never known battle now burned with the echo of gunfire. And yet through it all, one truth became clear. Humans, though smaller in number and weaker in technology, were not only surviving, they were forcing the galaxy to bend to their will. Mercenaries who once sold their loyalty to the highest bidder now refused any contract against humans. They whispered in bars and spaceports of battles that could not be explained, of comrades who vanished into darkness, of human soldiers who fought long after they should have fallen. It was no longer just fear. It was legend. The Galactic Council watched in frustration. Their mighty fleets were crumbling. Their soldiers, demoralized, every strategy that worked against others failed against humans, because the humans refused to fight like others. They adapted. They learned. They turned every loss into fuel and every scar into strength, even when outgunned. They never fought fair. They ambushed. They misled. They turned the battlefield itself into their ally, and for every empire that sent armies, another was forced to retreat in shame. But while the galaxy trembled, the humans remained silent. They did not broadcast their victories. They did not demand surrender. They simply pushed forward, one colony at a time, one world at a time. Some leaders in the council began to wonder aloud why humans fought this way, why they never stopped. Some believed it was survival. Others thought it was vengeance. But the darkest whispers claimed that perhaps humans were not fighting to survive at all. Perhaps they were fighting to win everything on the frozen world of Ithros. This fear grew into certainty. The council sent its strongest fleet, 100 warships and legions of soldiers. The humans had only a fraction of that number, and yet the battle that followed was one of the most terrifying in the galaxy's history. The council believed they had cornered the humans. They believed victory was certain. But when the fighting began, the humans revealed a weapon no one expected. Not a new ship, not a new gun, but a strategy they called the Wall of Silence. Instead of defending their positions, the humans allowed the enemy to advance deeper into the icy valleys. Then they cut them off piece by piece, isolating squadrons surrounding them and annihilating them before moving to the next. Not a word was spoken, not a cry, not a shout. Only the sound of weapons fire echoing through the snow. Alien soldiers reported that they felt hunted like prey in the dark. One survivor swore that even when he closed his eyes, he could feel human eyes staring at him through the blizzard. The council forces broke within days. Entire divisions surrendered, rather than face the silence again. Generals abandoned fleets. Colonies fell without resistance, and when news of Ithros spread across the galaxy, fear turned into panic. The humans were no longer seen as victims. They were no longer seen as underdogs. They were seen as predators, worse than any mercenary, worse than any empire. Empires began to turn on one another, blaming each other for awakening humanity. Some even tried to negotiate in secret. But the humans refused to answer their envoys. They did not speak. They did not explain. They only prepared for the next campaign. And this silence, this refusal to explain their purpose, terrified the galaxy more than open threats ever could. What did humans truly want if they were not fighting for money, if they were not fighting for territory, if they were not fighting for honor? Then what was driving them forward in the shadows of every council chamber, in the whispers of every mercenary? Bar in the reports of every surviving soldier, the question grew louder. Were humans harmless as they once seemed, or were they something far more horrifying? The galaxy had pushed them into war, believing it would break them, but instead, it had forged them into something new, something that could not be stopped. And as fleets moved and soldiers prepared, as colonies burned and worlds fell, the galaxy began to sense that the war was no longer about survival. It was about dominance. And if the humans continued to fight with the same cold silence, then there might come a day when no empire, no council, no mercenary dared to raise a weapon against them again. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy feared extinction not from monsters, not from machines, but from the quiet, relentless will of humanity itself. The galaxy was crumbling under the weight of its own fear empires that once ruled with iron fleets. Now hid behind words and treaties, mercenaries who once marched into any war, without hesitation, now vanished into the shadows, refusing all contracts against humans. The Great Council still tried to hold its power, still tried to assure its people that the tide would turn, but everyone knew the truth. The tide had already turned, and the silence of humanity was spreading like a storm that no one could control from the ruins of countless battles. The humans rose stronger, their fleets scarred but unbroken, their soldiers weary but unshaken. They had no throne, no empire, no ancient bloodlines to claim authority, and yet the galaxy could not deny their growing dominance one by one. Human colonies fortified themselves not just against enemies, but as beacons of defiance. Entire systems began to rally behind them not because humans demanded it, but because humans inspired it. Their silence on the battlefield, their unity in chaos, their refusal to break became a banner stronger than any empire's crest. Rumors spread faster than truth. Some claimed humans could see the future. Others swore their soldiers fought even after death. Whispers told of commanders who knew the enemy's plans before they were spoken. None of it was true, but in the galaxy, fear became its own weapon, and humanity wielded it without. Saying a word to many, this silence was more terrifying than fleets of warships. It was not rage that drove them, it was purpose, and purpose could not be destroyed on the shattered world of Krashal. The final turning point came the Galactic Council, launched what it called the Last Stand, a coalition of empires, the largest fleet ever assembled. A desperate attempt to crush the humans in one decisive strike. They poured every resource, every weapon, every soldier into this campaign, believing sheer numbers would overwhelm the silence. But when the battle began, the silence consumed them once more. The humans did not meet them head-on. Instead, they dismantled them, piece by piece, cutting supply lines, striking weak points, splitting the massive fleet into fragments, and turning allies against each other. Council soldiers expected chaos. But the humans moved with terrifying calm. They advanced without celebration, they destroyed without cruelty, they fought as though they had already seen the battle unfold, and when the council commanders realized they were losing, it was already too late. Fleets scattered, armies fell apart, entire empires crumbled in the wake of Krashal, and the legend of humanity grew into something the galaxy could no longer deny. Humanity was not harmless. Humanity was not fragile. Humanity was the force no one had foreseen after the battle ended. The council begged for negotiations. Emissaries were sent. Envoys offered peace trade, even submission, but the humans gave no answer. They did not demand tribute. They did not demand rule. They remained silent in their victory, and this silence became heavier than any terms could have been. What did they want? What future did they see, if not conquest, if not peace? No one could say, and that uncertainty left the galaxy paralyzed across the stars. Mercenaries told their tales with shaking voices. Entire fleets spoke of the silence. Entire armies spoke of the eyes of humans. Unflinching, unshaken, the galaxy finally understood why mercenaries refused to fight them. It was not weakness that made humans dangerous. It was their strength to endure. It was the will to rise after every fall. It was the silence that told enemies more than any words could say and the galaxy learned a lesson. It had never wished to learn. It had forced humanity into war, believing them harmless, believing them unworthy, and in doing so, it had created its own nightmare. Humans had become the measure by which fear itself was. Defined, the galaxy would never forget the silence that spread from world to world, carried not by threats, not by cruelty, but by the quiet, relentless march of a species that could not be broken, and so in the ashes of fallen empires in the shadows, of silent warships drifting through black space, one truth remained carved into the memory of the stars. Humans were never harmless. They were always waiting, always watching, and when forced into battle, they became the most horrifying enemy the galaxy had ever known.